have to apologize to you in advance because you happen to be in a cricket mad nation. And there is a quarterfinal going on right now between Pakistan and Australia, so apologies for the inattendeance. Quarterfinal. This is the quarterfinal. Match is over.
As expected, we lost.
So we might get another 50 people coming in. Anyway, it's my pleasure to welcome a very accomplished personality here today, Professor Kabat. And I've got a whole page of accomplishments, so you'll have to bear with me. Listen very carefully because we are talking about somebody who's highly accomplished. Professor Kabat is the Director General and Chief Executive Officer of the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, that's IASA for short. And IASA is an independent global international science and science policy institute with 22 member countries, more than 400 international staff, and a global research network that's comprised of over 2,500 scholars. And then there are about 300 partner institutions that are linked to IASA. He's also serving as a full professor of Earth Systems Science at Wageningen University in the Netherlands. He's also the founding chair and director of the Royal Dutch Academy of Sciences and Arts Institute for Integrated Research on the Wadden Sea region. He's also a member of the Leadership Council for the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network and co-founder of the high-level Alpha group. This is the Luxembourg group, in which global leaders from academia, governments, businesses, and civil society come together to support and advocate for sustainable transitions and sustainable development. And Professor Kabat has been trained as a mathematician as well as a hydrologist, and his academic career has spanned almost 30 years. He's published over 300 research papers that include 9 books, and he's serving on a number of international editorial boards and a number of peer-reviewed international journals. And so, among other awards, he has the ZAPE International Prize for the Environment, which was awarded to all the experts who worked on the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment in 2005, holds several honorary degrees, professorships, memberships, and distinguished fellowships internationally. And in 2013, Professor Kabat was honored by Her Majesty Queen Beatrix Knight with the Order of the Elephant, the Order of the Netherlands Lion, a natural order of chivalry founded in 1815 by King William I, which recognizes excellence in the arts, science, sport, and industry. So I bet you have a vitae that is about 400 pages long, and this is a succinct summary of all that. My pleasure to have you here, and he's going to talk about the ever important area of water. And I think the biologists in the audience know the significance of water, and it's an area that doesn't get really talked about all that much, but it's an area that we need to worry about. And so let's listen to what the professor has to say. So, please.
Thank you very much. Just I operate this remote, how do you operate it?
Could you all hear me?
Yes. Okay, so I will standing. I will just push the button. Yeah. I don't know. Do you need a mic? I think it's a small. How to mic is okay. Thank you very much. And apologies, by the way, for almost breaking into your match. I know how it feels because I'm from Netherlands, and when Netherlands play a football match against somebody like England, for example, probably I would not come to lecture either. So thank you for being here. It's for me great pleasure. I mean it's not just a statement to come here for 2 reasons. First, personally, I'm from Netherlands, and I've been chief advisor for Crown Prince of the Netherlands for water for many years. And until 1998, the Netherlands government had a lot of collaboration with Pakistan, specifically in this region. So I've been coming here for many times as a student, as a postdoc, as a a modeler of the land reclamation, irrigation, drainage, so this is only now almost. Last time I came in 1997, so long time ago. It's fantastic to see how place change, for better of course, and it's fantastic to see this beautiful campus and the energy which is coming from. So thank you for having me here. I will be today talking about water, and before I do that I will give you some little information about this wonderful institute. It's called YASA, and I will lead you to that because my title is Water at the Crossroads, it's a question mark. Are we at the crossroads? You know what we do, maybe we are. And a possibility to take a direction at the crossroads. In my thesis today will be a system science. I will talk to you today out of frustration, not out of anything else. And this is connected to my position as chief advisor to many of the international water negotiations for the last 30 years. I've been advising World Bank, ADB, Dutch government. I was in Rio plus 10 in Johannesburg. I was there where we agreed about development goals. I was at last 6 water fora, always coming as an enthusiastic, either young scientist or postdoc, hoping for a change. And I was at many minister conferences. I've seen ministers of state signing the agreements. And 6 years later we came back and we did the same. My frustration comes from the position that water, although being probably the most important enabler of the sustainability of life on the planet, is not making any progress. Neither at the global scene nor at the regional nations. In energy, we have the same problem, but energy is moving. And energy has the renewables and the alternatives. In water we don't. I think it's really a time to realize that if we don't put all our knowledge and all our international geopolitical efforts together on water, we may be facing within the next 20 years, not 100 years, a major issue called water. Before I come to that, let me tell you something about where I'm coming from. As I said, I am professor of science, mathematician, hydrologist, water cycle in Netherlands. Like you having my PhDs, go to university and all of that, but since 2012 I was privileged to be chosen to lead a very special institute. And introduction to this institute comes with a strange picture. You may ask, what is it to do with water? This is how the world looked like in Europe at least only 50 years ago. Cold War. It was after the Cuba crisis, and the Berlin Wall was very much alive. We had a cold crisis already in the 70s, and there was a space war coming up, leading to the possibility of war. And at that time, it was, again, world at crossroads. We could have gone wrong. We could have gone for the Cuba crisis, Third World War. We could have gone to that direction. We went to the Cold War, and there was somebody with a vision, in terms of, and you need a vision when you are at crossroads. And somebody was Jeff Kennedy and later President Lyndon Johnson, who picked up the phone in Washington and approached leadership of the Soviet Union with the following message. We have this divided world, we have this crossroads situation, and we should respect that we have a different political and geopolitical profile. But why don't we try to put together best scientists from both parts of the world to collaborate on the problems which are either too big or complex for a single institution, single country, even single political bloc. That statement has been documented in the White House archives. The statement was accepted with a great enthusiasm in former Soviet Union. Soviet Union leadership appointed Prime Minister Kosygin to negotiate with the US President, US government, creation of this institution which will be looking across the world, building bridge between the scientists on both parts, literally, to come to an understanding of the big issues which are too complex for one single institution. And I will show later that water is the same thing, it's too complex for one single institution. So after 4 years of negotiations, YASA, International Institute for Applied System Analysis, was founded by a charter undersigning ceremony by 12 founding countries. It was the United States, still the largest member of YASA, former Soviet Union, now Russian Federation, Japan, and the remaining 9 countries came out from the former Eastern Bloc, now from the former Western Bloc. For example, at that time, only 50 years ago, we had two Germanies still, Eastern Germany and Western Germany. This institute became a non-governmental international institute with a very special charter, having one single objective to put together a leading academy from the world to look into these problems in a transdisciplinary way. I will show later how our staff is built. It grew since. Right now we are a global institution having 22 member countries, organizations, 25 by the end of this year. And we have a major economist represented there, was all the BRICS are part of the IASA now. Pakistan joined the IASA in 2007, is a very important member. I must say, joining IASA officially doesn't mean that before joining or after you can collaborate. The IASA has a very special policy, we collaborate with everybody. Council is governing in a very general way, and the only thing which matters is the quality. For example, at this moment we have 22 member countries, and my staff is coming from more than 65. So it's a very competitive environment. Maybe interesting for you, since you are having your careers here at Blom's. In the IASA charter, it's fixed that no one can ever have a permanent contract with IASA. So we have a special law passed in Austria and member countries, some of them, which is allowing us to have a contracts maximized on 1 year basis. So every year there is a competitive procedure to extend the contract or not. And this is concerning about 350 researchers in the house and about 2,000 around the world. So it's quite a process. Frankly, when they offered me the job, my biggest worry was, how do I do this, right? How do I do this every year to look at so many people and to tell them maybe there's no contract for you? It's not needed. Because the environment, which hopefully you will experience when you come to visit us, the drive, the quality is so selective. So it doesn't happen. When people feel we are not fitting, they just go. And we are offering a huge career perspective in the international network, so people just simply take this. There are people like my deputy director, both energy specialist, who has been there for the last 38 years. We survived for the yearly contracts, as an example. So it's possible. It's 90% of it. So quickly what I said, about 330 core bodies in-house, we call it in residence faculty from more than 50 countries, 4,000 alumni around the world, and 3,500 are connected to us in our networks.
I asked a question. Out of 30, how many are Catholic?
Next slide. About one third. About one third. Yeah, about one third. Yeah. Thank you for the question. That's probably the next one. The number around the world, we have about 300 institutions which sign with us formal collaborative agreements. About 1,000 visitors from science and science diplomacy every year for a week or more, spending with us to internalize different projects, different commissions, all of that. About 20 meetings. So, for example, in financial year 2013, we asked a cohort of researchers with about 2,050 in 65 countries, just to give you a size of the operation. And it is both a in-house, with residents, and a network. So we are both institute and a hub to connect with this 2,000 plus coming to us for a week, 3 months, whatever, depending on the commitment of the project. Here it comes. So this is the way our staff is put together. It's a strictly trans and multidisciplinary. So about 37% of mathematicians and physicists, mathematical physicists from mathematics basically. Social science about 35% and 28% or vice versa is the natural science engineers. So it's quite a balanced cohort of science. The whole model, amazingly fatal. Am I still okay? Is this because there's some sound in it. We have 5 Nobel Prizes given to institute scholars over the last 40 years for the direct work with IASA, and 11 Nobel Prize awardees in the IASA external faculty network connected to us. Most of them who didn't pass away still connected to us. These are some examples. From Schelling, by the way, Nobel Prize Economics 2005, still very much connected to IASA and to the IASA young cohort. We received the Nobel Prize in 2007 for our contribution to the IPCC. I was privileged to receive the prize together with the IPCC chair. 19 the ASA scientists were involved in the PCC process over the last 8 years. This was a very big moment for the global environment, climate community. But we also have a large investment into the young generation. And this is something probably known, and I'm putting it here because we are advanced, and I hope that at once this program is known, and we will all encourage your students or being students to apply. It's called the Young Scientist Summer Program by SSP. It started in 1977, and it has now almost 2,000 alumni around the world. From Pakistan, I think it's 8 or even more than 8.
Sitting back here.
Okay, so you can check out if I'm telling truth. It's a fantastic program, isn't it?
Yes.
Life experience, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. But it's not a summer school. It's a research program where heavily selected scholars in the middle of their PhD come, and they are supervised by ASCA researchers, basically to work on their research and finish paper, and connect to the transdisciplinary ASCA environment and to different programs, and hoping that they will stay with us, and they usually stay with us for their whole life careers, coming back sometimes as a postdoc or other things. This generation of YSSP, of course, is already from 1977. Among them, many of the external ASCA faculty members in the position of chief science advisors in major governments, heads of the government offices, academic heads, presidents of the academies. For example, one of our most famous alumni now in that position is Professor John Holder, heading Obama's first DP office in Washington, in the ASCA Institute, and many others. I'm saying that because the network part of the institution is very important in science to policy, policy to science interaction of the scientific enterprise. We are members of more than 8 high-level advisory boards. There are some of them here, ranging from United Nations system all the way down to the major governments. And just to give you one or two examples of how the system science into the policy works, this is one of the recent successes where we published an article in Science based on the ASA capabilities, capacities, to calculate through what kind of measures can be taken to reduce air pollutants, 16 species in the atmosphere, to go to the WHO standard. And we pointed out a possible co-benefit of that investment for climate mitigation. It was in the time, 2011, where climate change discussion was in the crisis. There was an IPCC scandal, as they call it. United States Congress was dominated by climate skeptical attitudes. It was forbidden to speak about climate change in the Congress. And the United States Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, by the way, having chief advisor from NASA alumni, come with an idea to use the investment into the air quality control as a primary input to climate discussion. So it's a sector. We didn't come to the climate, we said it's the effort to reduce the air pollutants. Doing that, you can achieve about half a degree temperature rise mitigation, which is a clean option. So that pitch through air quality, but actually meaning also climate, led to a major coalition based on the ASA Science Group, now almost 40 members, which is making great contribution to the climate mitigation air quality around the world, and ASA is chairing the science board behind that particular coalition. The other example is even more exciting. The ASA was commissioned in 2003 by United Nations Secretary General with a study to look into the energy fusions in the world. And we were asked to look at 3 very clearly defined energy targets. Is it possible by 2050 to achieve full energy access around the world for those who don't have it? Currently, 2.5 billion people don't have access to the energy in the modern sense. For example, 500 million in India. Second, can we achieve by 2050 doubling of the efficiency of the energy mixes? Third, can we double the share of renewable energy by 2050? And how much will it cost? What kind of energy mixes will it require? Gas, oil, energy, nuclear, thermal, renewables. This is our turf. We have been doing energy studies since 80s, we did the road, so we could have said, well, let's do it. Let's take this charge and let's do the study. But we started to discuss with the UN Secretary General staff. We said, look, we are system cross-sectoral issue. Don't you think that addressing these issues by 2050, we also should think about co-benefits with climate? Vis-a-vis 90% of mitigation of the greenhouse gases is connected to the energy sector. So we said we will include into this sector mitigation of climate gases, and we do energy mixes which will satisfy at all the times the target of not having the planet warmer than 2 degrees C. Then we said the air quality problem, where EASA is a leading institution to advise major government, European Commission, is all connected to the energy emission. So why don't we have a sector number 3 into this context and say that all these energy mixes will also be within the limits of the air quality control and threshold in the major megacities around the world. Last, every year 40,000 people about die attributable to the air quality problem. And some of them in Pakistan, many of them in India. We said, why don't we have this energy primer input and entry also satisfying the factor 10 of lowering number of people dying from the air quality from 40,000 to about 4,000. So instead of going for this very well-funded study, we said we go for 4 sectors then. We make a bridge between energy sector, climate mitigation, environment, air quality, and health. Now we did all the calculations and it was a big success. It led to the announcement and handover of the report to Secretary General in 2012, and it became part of the major investment campaign called Energy for All. Currently there is a 500 billion pledges based on this study. For example, Bank of America, European Commission. But the real system science comes in this picture. Which I don't have. Let me tell you. This is about the cost. If you will do the cost of these energy measures, you will need something like 0.2% of the global GDP, which is $100 trillion every year until 2050. If you do all the efforts that we do it now into the climate mitigation, you will need about 0.6% of global GDP. And if you do all the efforts you need to do for air quality, about 0.8. Altogether, 1.6% of the global GDP is needed every year until 2050 to achieve the goals of climate mitigation, energy goals, and air quality in the classical way of the related sector. Ministry of Energy, money to energy, Ministry of Environment to energy. If you do all those 3 sectors plus health together in a system analysis approach, meaning you share the budgets, you follow an integrated approach, the cost is about 40% less. This is probably the most powerful demonstration of value of the system approach. Now, from this frame, let me now go to water. And let me now go for arguing that we need a similar approach to water. I think the overall statement, our planet is suffering from the water insecurity, I don't think we repeat very much. We know it's connected to the reliability of the supply, it's connected to the poor sanitation, it's connected, and specifically here in Pakistan, to the flood mitigation and post-disaster, pre-disaster. It's connected to the degraded water environment and issue of the technologies around water purification. As I said, despite of this 30 years of the international efforts, despite of the development goals agenda, these are the numbers. Now, as we speak, 1.4 billion people, 1.4 billion people, still in the watersheds with a capacity below the threshold, which is 1,000 cubic meters per capita per year. 1.4 billion. That number can go to 2.5 billion in the next 20 years if we don't do this. 2.4 billion people, just stay second with it. Despite of all the effort we've been taking, still without full sanitation. 2.4 billion people on the planet, 2.4 billion don't have a basic sanitation. No water. 1 million people without access to safe drinking water. I mean, can we be proud of this as a global community after so many efforts globally? And think we should reflect deeply on this and try to find out why we haven't made progress in the global water chain. Of course, there are many other ways to illustrate the problem. This is a study which was done by NASA recently, linking the Human Development Index to access to drinking water, and you see there is a very, very clear relationship. Water is enabling sector, it's not a sector on its own. This is my first statement. Water is a cross-cutting sector, no sector on its own. At the moment you see isolation starting to stay, because the HDI, of course, is connected to all the sectors, education, economic growth, and you see how it's connected to the access to water in a very clear correlation. These are some of the numbers of the annual benefit which we calculated of the full access to water in a number of countries where there's a success, like South Africa. You see in South Africa, after implementing the thresholds, we have seen the reduction in diarrheal diseases from up to 70% in some divisions. These are major numbers behind the investment. And again, this is technology. We see the cost in this secondary sphere. Of course, it leads to the saving cost in the healthcare. Yet another system question. We are not used as economists to go to this secondary tertiary benefit. We just see the cost of sanitation. And we see, but we don't go back to the benefits of saving the expenses which you otherwise would be made. For example, for the healthcare in case of diarrhea. Yet another, this is the tertiary benefit. How much days of work are gained because people are able to go to work instead of staying at home for weeks with diarrhea. So you see, this is all illustrations that to be able to calculate benefit of primary investment, we need to go to the second and tertiary sphere of the as well. The business leaders, some of them are JASA connected, meet at Davos every year, and they rank in the high-level session the major risk for their businesses around the world. Right. So this is the picture, not from last Davos, but from 2014. I have no time to pick up a new one. We see the major risk high up is the financial failure, water supply crisis, chronic fiscal imbalances, diffusion of weapons, and climate change. Now this is how they rank the global risk in 2014 and 2015. Water became number one. So the lead world businesses come together and they declare water being the major risk for the business sustainability. So the recognition is not coming only and anymore from the governments, it's coming also from the businesses about water important. Let me show you some numbers. These are the JASA compilations of world water use by sector from 1900 until about 2020 now. These are cubic kilometers per year. So altogether, at this moment, we as a humanity, for all the sectors, consume every year about 5,500 cubic kilometers of water. I think there are 2 or 3 striking issues on this graph, at least to me. First, rate of the change. Look, when we as a humanity became big water users, only last 60 years. Earth system never experienced such an anthropogenic influence in water use before. This is the extreme acceleration in terms of water use. So it really started to happen after the Second World War. Second striking feature is this dark blue line. Dark blue line is agriculture sector. The light blue line is the households drinking water. The purple line is this one is industry, and the green line is reservoirs for energy. This dark blue line is 70% of all water around the world goes to agriculture, goes to the food, goes to irrigation. 70%. And there are countries, and there are not too far from Pakistan situation, there are some places this number is even higher. I think in Pakistan this number is between 70 and 80%, if I'm not mistaken. In India, in some of the places, it's 100%. Now, remember this. These are the sectoral breakdown. These are the best numbers we can get nowadays. It's all compilation of the national statistics, models, satellite data, all of that. And now we have the same picture, which I prepared for you, per region, per continent. Again, Europe, dark blue, North America, Africa, Asia, South America, and Australia, Pacific. There are two striking features to here, at least in the system analysis. One is this break down of the trend. In all the continents but Asia, something happened in terms of awareness. In 1980, we saw stabilization of the increase. That is the time when we started to develop water-effective toilets, when we moved in Europe and in America, for example, to the triple irrigation, drip irrigation, etc., etc. Big effect. This is Asia. We are here. 75% of all water globally now is used in Asia. So my position is world leaders and schools used to talk for years about hotspot water. Africa is the hotspot, but the real hotspot for water is Asia. It's here, as we speak. Combination of this with the previous picture, which shows that agriculture needs 70%, makes the statement substantiated. Here, down to India, 1.2 billion people, Pakistan, 200 million now, maybe 100 million more within the next 50 years, I don't know. Whole Mekong Delta, Vietnam, etc. This is where the population will not only grow still, we are expecting that Yasa will be 1 more billion people in this region by 2050, but also the food requirements, dietary requirements may change. We need 70% more food by 2050. How to do it, given the current situation? And this is even not showing the competing requirements of water. I will come to it later. It is not showing nexus, it's showing just agricultural water requirements. So real hotspot of water is here, in Asia, Southeast Asia, Asia, rather than in the else. As I mentioned already, it will become even more challenging because these are the population expectation for Asia, based on the recent Yasa census and the publication, which is concurrent with UN, showing about 1 more billion people in this region here. Depending on the way how it goes, in India it will be anything between half more billion and even more. Yes, please.
Just a thought. So, do we see a correlation then in the productivity also in the agriculture, the food production also in the Asia went the similar way, the way the...
It's an inverse correlation.
It's inverse.
Yeah, at least in Asia. Because in Asia, lot of irrigation is furrow irrigation, flood irrigation, with efficiency which is so low that you lose about 80% of water for non-productive purposes. So we need to go for efficiency, we need to go for different irrigation systems which are losing less water. That's what it is.
Post-1940s, when there's a sudden rise in the agriculture water usage in Asia, do we see more area then covered by agriculture? That's why we have this?
Both. It's an area growing, but it's also intensity growing. So it's both. So again, the challenge, not in 100 years, but in the next 30 years, will become this one. 2 more billion people. We know that for certain globally. We need about food production 70% more if nothing changes in food production. If we don't start to eat algae, we still eat hamburgers and everything, whatever it is, we need 70% more. This is a big question because, for example, we have done study into the global dietary balance. Average American, I'm sorry Maggie to say this, but I will say it's not you, needs every year 120 kilo of red meat. 120 kilo. I know Maggie doesn't do it, so that's average European, 60 kilo. Average Asian, 12 kilo. What will happen in China? Would China go American way by 2050? If does, then we have a pictures which are under imagination because we need to produce meat-based diet for China, which means about 10 times more water compared to the vegetable diet. So you see, it's all connected also with this typical trend. We need to understand much systemic trends rather than just food production. Now, so this is, but of course, this is just a food part of it. Electricity, water nexus, is a forgotten issue. Pakistan 2025, which I like very much, and we discussed it with Mr. Akbal and others about yesterday in Islamabad, it's fantastic, but it talks about energy challenge and water challenge, education challenge. It doesn't talk about connection. What do you do if you build
a number of thermostations without being certain about water. And what you do when the water will be competing for irrigation is an exercise. So they are more users than just agriculture, energy, industrial water use. And there are users which we even don't want to talk about because we are scared of talking about it. Let's call it ecosystems, environmental flows. We have done study on Indus and on Ganges, for example, but also other big rivers in Ireland. And to sustain the aquatic ecosystems in the current state, or the biodiversity, as an average, we would need to leave untouched between 20 and 30% of the discharge. So imagine Indus, where you will be purposefully leaving 30% of the discharge for nature, knowing all these pressures which are coming from agriculture, energy, etc., beyond imagination. Right? But this is the reality. So we have multiple competing users, and we need to look into the next position. Now, let me take you back, since this is university, to the more fundamental. I am motorcycle mathematician, I have been studying modeling climate water system for a long time. So, first question we should ask ourselves is hydrological cycle changing? Do we see any changing in the major water balance because of all these trends, climatic trends and anthropogenic trends and population trends? So let me just do a very simple lecture or discussion with you here. Water cycle, if we changing, what would be then changing? Well, there are four parameters in the water balance: precipitation, evaporation, runoff, and storage. Right? This is basically what we talk about. I will concentrate, just for sake of the argument, on two of those. Precipitation, of course, is changing because of the climate change. But let me just look at the runoff. Let me give you some of the example of the trend. This is a map, compilation by Yasa together with Munich Re, of the world cities, coastal world cities, in 1950, exceeding 5 billion inhabitants. This is only 60 years ago. We see here New York, we see the European triangle, London, Paris, and the Dutch conglomeration of cities, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Hague, Randstad. We see Moscow, and we see here Shanghai and Tokyo. This is how it looked like in 1950. This is how it looks like now. Some glass of water, please. Okay. Now, I'm putting it here to show one of the challenges, which is called urbanization in the Iran. All this led to a huge building of the hard surfaces in the coastal region, sometimes going from the coast to 50 kilometers inland, extremely accelerating runoff, accelerating extremely the flood risk. So one of the consequences, for example, of the drivers of the change in the global runoff is urbanization. At present, we have 55% of population living in the coastal megacities. That number is predicted to go up within the next 20 years to 75%. And we have the whole issue of the flood risk in the coastal cities. If you look around the world in the newspapers just last 10 years, how many of the floods are connected to the coastal cities? One example. This is the urbanization, as the ASFA did all the trends. And you see here how this is being looked at. You see that urbanization in Western Europe, for example, went through a rather relatively modestly steep curve. You see how this is now going over the next 50 years in big places like China or Africa. So we have this trend which needs to be put together, which will lead to the change of trend. Storage, special part of my lecture. This is the animation. It's my dear colleague and friend Professor Takeuchi from Japan. How many dams we have built around the world over the last 150 years. Look at it. Here, for example. Do we still have any water, any drip going straight to the ocean without being kept behind the bars? No, we don't. We are having places like the United States where we modulate 99% of the runoff anthropogenically by dams. We are delaying runoff, we are manipulating runoff, we are silting the reservoirs, we are manipulating the whole system. Now this is known. As we speak, yesterday I had a teleconference as an advisor to one of the big projects. Country like Laos, for example, is building 33 reservoirs for hydropower, paid by Thailand. And this picture is predicted to become much more red within the next 15-20 years, because currently there are plans supported by major investors to build about 20% more of this red capacity. So yes, the storage changed a lot. Somebody got this last vote, This is yet another thing which I call hidden water challenge. Nobody talks about it anymore. It's interesting. So this is a beautiful picture of the Bay of Bengal, Bangladesh, showing the low-lying delta where the three major rivers come together. Four is Ganges basin, it's Brahmaputra, and it's Meghna. Huge system. And I was asked about 5 years ago by the president of Asian Development Bank to become chief science advisor on a project which was actually focused on a very little part in this system. City of Khulna, which is here, is a city in Bangladesh, about 100 kilometers from the coast, 1 million people. It was in 2010, I think, 9. And that city has a problem. Every summer, the water is becoming so salty that people cannot use it for cooking and not for washing. Because by cooking you get a diarrhea, and washing it you get a skin disease. So this city of Khulna here, 100 kilometers from the sea, is a saline city during 3 months a year. And we have 100,000 salinity refugees leaving the city of Khulna because of salinity. Thank you very much. Now, interesting thing was that the big bank like ADB asked me to advise on a project where here they would make a Japanese-made grand canal pipe to transfer water between two rivers. And I said to them, well, look at it. Isn't it a question of the system? This is a question, where is the problem really? The problem, of course, is partly natural because of the salinity intrusion, so sea level rise, and the land subsidence, so saline water comes up. But it's also because the water which is needed coming from upstream, fresh water, to push out the salt in the summer is being kept behind the dams built by China on Brahmaputra and built by India on Ganges. So we need to look into this as a system question. We don't need to look only at the particular solution locally. So the project became a project of the transboundary discussion about the way how Ganges dams would be regulated to leave enough water coming down to fresh the salt out from the system by city of Khulna. Now this is now. But the city of Khulna has 100,000 people who don't have a fresh water to cook and to wash in 3 months a year. We have done scenarios. This is the current situation. Suddenly the threshold is 5 parts per 1,000 ppt here. And this is the salinity line above 5 ppt now. This is the Khulna. This is now without any change. If sea level rise will be only 30 centimeters, which probably will happen without any climate change, the number of people which will be behind the salinity lines will go up. And if salinity of sea level rise will be 80 centimeters, we will be facing the problem of penetration of this line something like 100 kilometers from the coast. This is about 70 million people. Now, nobody talks about this salinity challenge. Same situation is in the Mekong Delta, same situation in the large deltas. We have no technique, no technology, no agreement to prevent it. So water challenge is also surprisingly salinity challenge. I mentioned groundwater. This is the latest data coming from YASA, which shows the total groundwater withdrawal for all sectors in percentage of surface and groundwater withdrawals. It's just simple scale. So how much you rely on groundwater in your supply. You see the scale goes from 0 to 100%. And look at some of the regions, not only in India, Pakistan, but also in America, where we simply close our eyes and go to take all the water from groundwater, and then just simply pretending that that water will be there forever. It won't be there forever. 3 weeks ago, I was visiting the government of Mr. Modi in India, and he challenged Yasa with a project which will help him to clean Ganges. And then we discussed about other challenge, which is agriculture and food. And I said to him, look, this is all irrigation, food security, relying on groundwater. What will you do is, if this groundwater availability will go down by 20%, or 10% even. No calculations like that in your mind. So, hidden problem, groundwater we don't see, we just take it until it's there, forget it. By the way, I had a similar story about gas in Pakistan, somebody told me. Where there was a lot of gas and oil, and then it was taken up and then forgotten, and it's not anymore there. So, it's a question of how to get scenario. So, groundwater, salinity. Okay. So what I believe is a real way ahead. First thing, to leave this discussion behind us, which was forever there, is water a local or global issue? Well, it is both. It is both because the world is connected through a global economy. So you cannot really solve anymore, and this is the big misconception by the major banks. You have to see the system. Let me give you an example before I go to this one. Still, the big donors, the big banks, are very keen on small-scale projects in Africa to give money to farmers to dig a new hole and to have a new water. And there is a little bit more protection. What sense does it make if you don't invest in lifting up import barriers from the European Commission, Union, to bring this produce and to sell it on the European markets? System. What does it sense if you don't build roads, infrastructure, and if you don't build storage capacity, where he loses about 40% of his production? So we are still looking on the hoping to help, being genuinely willing to help, but forgetting there is a system. By global, this is the tide flooding in 2011. It cost about 45 billion cost, 32 billion in manufacturing sector, and Toyota Corporation has this main producing factory there. The whole local flooding in Thailand shook the world industrial production, which was lowered by 2.5%. Global auto production was down by 20%. 420,000 cars lost, $2.7 billion lost by the car company. And it shook the global markets for about 5 months. The effect was about 3 to 5% of lowering the shares. This is just an example how a local or regional water-related effect is connected with the globe, and vice versa. So we need different approach. We need to look into the system. We need to look into the system from 2 points of view: global versus local, and all the economic and industrial and biological and human connections. But also to look into the water as a enabling element of the system rather than sector. This is the way how YASA does it. YASA formulates in our research agenda 3 major areas: energy and climate, food and water, and water equity. You see they are all interconnected. We call it nexus connection. So where we really like to look is here, where water is for food is competing with water for energy, and where water is competing for sanitation. We put together a picture which is integrated. We call it nexus. Now, I have been lead author on IPCC reports and CLA for like 3 or 4 different sequences, and which I mentioned we were very proud to receive this Nobel Prize for that. And I was always in the water tube. And at the moment we finalized the final report, which was showing the climate-related risk, I knew we were wrong with water. Because what it says here, the temperature increase and the risk of open range in different sectors. And it says water security. It will be very affected when the temperature will be about 5 degrees along here. It says coastal communities. It says energy security. It says major infrastructure. It says agriculture, forestry. Well, as I mentioned already, this is really not true, because water should have been taken as a crosscut. Not just for the water security cannot be horizontal. So the whole concept, even with the top academia, is now changing. It's really at a crossroad paradigm change. Some examples of this nexus. We have completed study, my PhD was lead author on this, published in Nature, about the water energy nexus. You look into the thermal and nuclear power sector in the United States and in Europe. What may happen to it because of the conflict for cooling water? You need a lot of cooling water when you operate energy sector, either the thermal or nuclear. Cooling water is taken in most of the places around the world from the surface water. Surface water in the summer is becoming scarce because of the competition, because of climate change, and much more warmth than needed because you need some temperature. So we calculated what will happen around 2030 with the energy sector in US and Europe because of the cooling water problem. And we calculated that in the summertime, up to 20% of the availability of energy will not be there because of no cooling water available. Interesting. Water energy sector. Nobody thought about it before. We just built all these plants around Germany and around France and around Poland. We never thought about it. Water energy nexus. Here's another example, which is an example of these three different nexus ideas. First one is, I'll put it together, in Colorado River, where we look into the aquatic ecosystem, salmon spawning, and what may happen when the future water climate affected water discharge will happen together with other pressures. Well, this spawning of the salmon, which is happening there, which is affecting the whole global marine salmon habitat, can only happen in the water which is no warmer than 21 degrees C. Now, this is how the water temperature there will be based on the most probable scenario of the world. You see that for about 3 months, from March, June, July, August, we will exceed this threshold, meaning there will be no possibility for this particular species to grow. Second example, in Europe, the River Rhine, this is the water cooling, I mentioned already, for energy. 23 degrees is the maximum temperature you can have when you take water for cooling of the thermal station. You will see here, this is the reason why I talk about this 20%. About 3 months in the summer, we will not have that temperature. We will exceed it, meaning there is no cooling water. Number 4, coming from this region, this is the Mekong Delta sanitation. The 25 degree water temperature threshold, which is there to ascertain the health environment without incubation for diseases, will be exceeded within the next 30 years for most part of the world. As an example. Of course, I can put this together. Talking about nexus. One example before I stop. This is coming from my advisory work, and we later picked it up at JAXA, to the Millennium Development Process, MDG. At that time, it was all about building schools and building sanitation in Africa mainly, more than 90 countries. And what we looked at was the way how most of these countries do exercise to show a high degree of the interannual rainfall variability. This is, for example, one of the countries, this is Zimbabwe, showing that there could be a good years and bad years in terms of rainfall. And when we negotiated development goals, we have tried a number of climatologists and water scientists to convince the UN system that you need to include in your goals this terrible climate variability. Because if you don't, you may be facing extremes following each other. You may be facing good year and bad year. Good year meaning a lot of flood, destroying infrastructure, bad year no water at all. For example, in Kenya, when there is a sequence of La Nina and La Nina, which is the dry and wet year, those 2 years can wipe out 40% of the GDP growth. And we failed. We failed to convince the UN system in 2002, to put up climate variability into the UN goals, because it was politically compromised. Now, what we have done then we put up a study, and we linked the economic growth in these countries with the interannual variability. You see the fantastic correlation for all these countries. literally rainfall determines large part of GDP growth and growth. And we took it further, and this is the better picture of that. So this is Zimbabwe. The blue one is interlinear rainfall variability. This is how GDP follows. So we use this, and we develop a simple parametric model to look at it, and then we came back to you and said, okay, what's the solution for it? What is the solution before you start to invest in schools and latrines and everything there? What do you need to look at? You need to look at the pumping capacity infrastructurally with this interlinear variable. So as a basic parameter, this is political science, we have compared the water storage volume per capita in major countries in the world. Water storage is big dams, small dams, water harvesting, all of that. Now look at it. In North America, Europe, etc., we have roughly 5,000 cubic meters per capita water storage. Again, store water in the good years, for bad years, protect from flood water. In countries we talk about, 90 of them, the number is between 40 and 50. It's clear. It's crystal clear. We need to first increase the storage capacity to the critical level, and then on top of that infrastructure, build all these wells and all these schools and all these sanitation facilities. Because if we don't, we will misinvest. Big flood will wash it all away. So this is a simple language which science is communicating and policy didn't want to listen. So what did we do? We said, okay, we will see within the next 10 years failure of the investment. We see that. We see country like Ethiopia where the big hallelujah happened of investing into schools. We see already half of them being destroyed because of the famine or because of the floods. So we have done calculation. This will come out in Asia next month before Panic Summit. So this is interesting. Bear with me. We took all these countries, this is just some of them, Lesotho, Namibia, Nigeria, Ethiopia, all the way down. And we looked at the additional storage per capita needed, not to achieve the US or European level, but to achieve 1,000 cubic meter, which is the South African good level. So, for example, a country like Ethiopia will need to build 555 cubic meter per capita to be at 1,000. Then we calculated how much will it cost, discounting the dollars, everything for next years. Then we come to the total cost. The Ethiopia example is 46 billion. And then we did an exercise, assuming that these countries would grow at a rate of 5% annual GDP, and full growth will go to the building of this infrastructure, being independent from the donors. So if that assumption is made, Ethiopia, for example, would have to wait 144 years before it's at the level of the sustained infrastructure on which you can build things like schools and nothing. I think this is a wonderful demonstration of the value of system thinking. You simply forget because of the political convenience. You spend billions, you lose half of it because such a clear language politicians cannot accept to be part of the equation. I started with a vision of JFK and President Johnson. I think what we need in this water at Crossroads, we need vision again. We need vision which will be both broad and deep, which will be connecting vision, connecting sectors, connecting countries, going back to the transboundary, opening up areas which we close for the hidden problems, like groundwater, like salinity, partnering up with private sector and governments. We also need change narratives. You know, we are much used to portraying these big problems of flood risk, of famine because of drought, and then we go to conference and we convince each other how bad it is. I think we could change it now. We could go to the opportunities which this water challenge presents. Opportunities for innovation, businesses, for R&D, accelerating process. Let me give you one example. The salinity problem, which I portrayed to you on the Bay of Bengal, Mekong Delta. I am now in this Water Futures and Solutions program, which EASA leads, talking to the major business industrial world, making desalinization technology. This is Tucson from China, from Korea, this is Siemens from Germany. And they make this fantastic technology called reverse osmosis membrane, which produces you from saline water fresh water for something like $1.50 per cubic meter. That's fine, and I go to a hotel in Egypt because I can stay a week and I can pay them. But it's not fine to use that technology for this large-scale problem of, for example, farmers in Bangladesh. So I'm telling them, look, you are stupid. You are now investing into a very small market, elite market. If you tell me how fast you can transfer your technology to the more robust, making it 10 times cheaper, I will give you a market of billions. So this is the dialogue. And they are actually buying into it. They are part of the project and trying to develop technology scenarios, and this will become robust and cheap. So let me just once more tell you that this initiative, this new program, World and Solutions of YASA, in partnership with the United Nations, Korean government, Water Council, is now open for partnerships. I discussed already this afternoon with your leadership teams that will be opening a lot of collaborations there, and I hope that many of you in the room will be somehow able to connect. So let me thank you for bearing with me here. I hope it was a little bit useful to stimulate debate. This is the place which YASA is hosted very graciously by Austrian government, one of the castles of Habsburg monarchy. It's given free of charge to international science, and I really hope that many of you will be able to come. I will be able to welcome you to discuss further at YASA. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. Questions? A few minutes for questions.
Sorry. So you talked about these water energy nexus like questions. And I just wanted to share with you that I very recently got involved with this water business. And in a recent visit to the agriculture department in Punjab, I was told that there is a big initiative going on-farm water management, where we are being convinced by the banks as well as internally by our studies that we are wasting too much water by flood irrigation, so we should switch to sprinkler. And my first question was that who is going to power all this? We are going to need diesel or energy and whatever. And I mean, so those sort of system analysis questions I began to probe, is there anyone who is looking at it from a provincial or national sort of perspective? And I mean, your presentation immediately resonates with me on this sort of thinking. Yeah. That you cannot really think about one problem alone and forget about where the rest is going to happen. Even within the water sector, once you do this sprinkler irrigation for the whole province, there are my friends who are hydrologists who would know better, and there are going to be salinity problems by leftover salt in the. I mean, even within the water sector, there are so many systems analysis, these sort of questions that sort of we are forgetting, and without looking at the whole picture. So I mean, I would like you to, for example, if for example we are able to pose these questions for you, what would be the sort of science needed to tackle these questions? Is this just mathematics, system analysis, so to speak, or do you be an expert? You can give some glimpse into this scenarios work that you do.
Well, it would be no different from any other integrated study. You would have to put plausible passes to expose to industrial makers what are the core benefits and what are the dangers of not thinking about. It would need basically the all the disciplines I talked about. It needs social science, it needs institutional transition, it needs governance, it needs international political scientists, it needs technology, and in this team you need a kind of consulting group, think tank, which will be behind the study, which could sort of put numbers and put concrete pathways as an example. To me, one thing is solution, the other thing is red flag. Because people don't know. People simply think they are really, of course, in their world they are right. We need to increase efficiency. To give them room to think. If I invest in that efficiency increase, I need to think about energy system, off grid, or on grid, I do not know. We need to think about other things. So those studies are not available. I didn't mention that it's not everything is completely bad. There are agencies which do realize the challenge. For example, the Global Environmental Fund, which is funding agency, not a lending agency. Having 20 billion budget for GF6, they came to YASA and with a question, we understand, we would like YASA to calculate for us, to develop for us a system, decision support system, on which we will be testing our investment on the next level. Meaning, if we give grant money for energy or for agriculture, we would like to understand how much good or bad it does to the energy and to environment and to other sector. We started that project, it's on YASA website 2 weeks ago. It will be a fascinating journey because we'll be feeling empowered to give it to decide about 20 billion, of course. But in the end, it will go to the region, it will go to the governments. So I see this is one possibility to expose this field of connectivity to those who are investing and who are making decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on agriculture, but before you go from flooding to sprinkler, there are stages to, promote furrow, cultivation, which reduces the amount of water that you are at. The other thing is that, unfortunately, what's happening is that 90% of the people that we have working on the farms are illiterate and totally uneducated. They are handed over from father to son, and their children, when they get educated, they don't want to stay on the farm. So the technology in agriculture is very, very primitive. And the farmer knows only one thing, that he can only get a good crop by watering, whether it's over-watering. And my own information is that the problems that we have in Sindh is now drowning in water because they have over-irrigated that place. Because the rulers for the last 25, 30 years in Islamabad were from Sindh, and they did not want, they wanted all the water to go down to Sindh, and not realizing that they have poisoned their own ground by overwatering. The third thing is, as you mentioned, in storage. Here, when you talk about storage, only people think of Kabat Dam, which is a red herring to everybody else outside the Punjab. We should think of storage, small storages, and which are not really barrages, but they store the rainwater instead of it sort of dissipating, either flowing into the river or creating floods. We should store that water to be used when there is no rain.
Absolutely. Actually, it's a combined, or it's not only large dams, actually it's much more than dams. Yeah.
So, did you come up with solution for dengues?
Oh no.
Because
there is that.
I mean, the question I'm trying to pose is, or I'm thinking about, it's going to be a huge problem for that population. So, of course, the solution might come when you look at it at a systems level. So, looking at how many dams are being built on these three rivers and why the salinity is the prediction what you are making, like 70 million or maybe close to million people being affected by salinity. So, it's like nearly 3 countries I know.
At least China, India, and Bangladesh.
So whatever solution you come up with, or you recommend, it means 3 different countries. But at a scientific level, did you come up with some proposal that that's how they do?
We do. It's a fascinating field. I mean, one of my notions was that we will see in the near future complete revival of the transboundary water debate. It's kind of forgotten. It was there. I was myself involved in advising the World Bank to the Nile Basin Initiative. This was this whole little. We did everything becoming connected around boundaries. So, of course, we are calculating all possible trade-off options. It's becoming an interesting portfolio because we are trading producers here at the agriculture between those 3 countries. We are sort of trying to develop scenarios where the downstream loss of production will be compensated by the export from upstream. We are trying to sort of study on future governance. We have again theoretical approaches where we test so-called balance of the sticks and carrots to actually make governments talk to each other again. But it's all in a science to policy dialogue. In the end, somebody will have to invest in the solution. We try to go as far as we can. When there is an investment made, then we try to be part with that, because at the moment you start to invest, the world is changing again, so you don't make these scenarios all the time. That's the only way to proceed. I believe that some of the breakthrough will be there in the next 10 years. For example, on the salinity, I believe that this challenge to produce energy low, cost low, this how will be taken up seriously by Korean, by German, by American companies, so that will be one of the things. But it is a continuous dialogue. I think the novelty in this is that we are starting to expose again the real potential solution. And we are sort of taking people out of this very single-minded view to one sector, one place, to the system view, which eventually will save the money. as I illustrated on the energy investment, when you do it together with energy, air quality, and water climate, 40% cheap. So this is something which politicians and investors potentially will buy into.
Well, one area which I have not heard today is to stop you throwing raw sewage and chemicals into the river system, which really is affecting the health of the people downstream. And I think if they work out the economics of it, to clean up, to sort of clean the, instead of putting the sewage there, you recover the sewage and convert that into fertilizer. I think that the economics, it will pay for itself.
And the Ganges, is a typical example of the political frenzy, I call it, because that's one of the main points of this model. And within the next 2 years, 40 force points of the inlet of the sewage must be cleaned without anything else possible. So everything can happen in terms of flux, discharge depth. So it's a political object. And half of it goes fair for the reasons we just talked about. And it's driven by the short-term political objectives. Of course, it's a very pressing issue, but a little bit of step back, step aside, think about the system of it, how it's connected. So on one hand, it's applauded. On the other hand, my prediction is half of it will fail better because of this lack of connectivity.
Okay, I don't wish to come in the middle of a flowing conversation here, but we've run out of time. But if you want to continue interacting with the professor, then we can move to the SEC, to the 5th floor. By all means, I think most of the people here are SEC, so let's all move to the 5th floor in the Smart Lab, and then we can continue with the Q&A. We seem to have triggered a lot of thinking here.
Thank you very much.